All right. A very good morning to everyone, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, and passionate advocates for climate action. Welcome to day three of the Malaysian Support for COP30 event, a 10-day virtual journey held in conjunction with the UN Climate Change Conference in Belém, Brazil. Over the next 7 days, we will explore key climate themes from ecosystems and adaptation to finance and the blue economy, highlighting how Malaysia is turning climate ambition into meaningful action. Additionally, you're welcome to visit our website to browse the daily themes. Today's theme, Anchored in Resilience, highlights how our region is building strength and stability amidst rapid change. It underscores the importance of strengthening infrastructure resilience, water security, and food supply continuity through innovation. As we accelerate the energy transition, reimagine tourism, and green our supply chains, resilience means creating systems that are not only sustainable, but also fair, inclusive, and adaptable. It is about ensuring that progress today can endure the challenges of tomorrow. To kickstart our program, we begin with a conversation with Dr. Gary Theseira, Chair of the Council of CGM, joined together by Dr. Yogi Chellappan, Senior Manager and Lead, Climate Resilience of Think City. Continuing our exploration of COP30 outcomes, the session turns the spotlight on resilience, in the sense what it truly means for nations, cities, and communities facing the realities of climate extremes. Together, they'll reflect on how health, disaster preparedness, and planetary well-being intersect in shaping a climate-ready future. Please join me in warmly welcoming Dr. Gary and Dr. Yogi as they share their insights and reflections to open our day three conversation.
Thank you very much, Aaron, and a very good morning, everyone. Thank you, first of all, for joining us on day three of our parallel COP session as we shadow the themes and the developments over in Belém in Brazil. As mentioned by Aaron, the theme today is resilience, and in particular, we want to be anchored in resilience. The idea being, of course, that resilience has two separate components. You can think about it that way, perhaps. The first really is absorptive capacity. How much of a beating can you take from climate impacts before you begin to incur loss and damage? That's one aspect of it. And the other is of course, we understand that when it comes to climate impacts, there are some for which it's impossible to adapt to, and so you are going to take loss and damage. And in that case, the thing is becomes how quickly can you rebound and re-establish your operations or whatever service or product that you are delivering or producing. As usual, what I'll do in the first 20 minutes of the section this morning is give a slight recap of what's been going on at the COP in Belém, and following that we'll bring in Dr. Yogi Chellappan, who is with Think City, and we'll have a bit of a more in-depth discussion on the topic of resilience. Well, what's been going on at the COP? We are at the third day now, Wednesday, into the official level negotiations, and parties are beginning to get into the meat of the negotiations per se. And one of the big stories that we have coming out of the COP is the extremely contentious negotiation around the development of something called a just transition mechanism. Now, the negotiations frequently become polarized in a couple of ways. The idea is that we need to find mechanisms that are effective moving forward, and there's always this constant pull between trying to use existing mechanisms to achieve the goals and the targets that we need to achieve versus the need to develop perhaps a new mechanism, perhaps a more appropriate mechanism in order to achieve something. And oftentimes what you find is that after pounding on the efforts to use an existing mechanism to achieve a particular end, in this case, just transition, we find that developing countries can become fatigued when a mechanism that was supposed to deliver something as complex as a just transition simply just doesn't deliver, and they decide that something more is needed, something specific, something more fit for purpose is needed to deliver that mechanism. Now, that discussion is going on right now at the COP in the sense that the developing countries have united under the Group of 77 and China to call for a just transition mechanism. So this call was led by the Group of 77 in China. They presented a united front in advocating the creation of this just transformation mechanism. We'll call it the JTM. Egypt took the floor for the Group of 77 in China to propose the mechanism, and they outlined the objectives as well as the key functions and the features of this mechanism. So in other words, the Group of 77 in China have coordinated to come up with an outline for the proposed mechanism. All the major groups of developing countries supported this proposal, including the Independent Alliance of Latin America, ILAC, the Caribbean nations, African group, the least developed countries, or LDCs, the like-minded developing group, LMDC, AOSIS, the Alliance of Small Island States, and the Arab group, all joined in supporting the work to develop this mechanism. However, we had very, very strong pushback from the developed countries, among them Japan, Norway, United Kingdom, the Environmental Integrity Group, which is a group led by Switzerland, Australia, Canada, as well as the European, all did not support the Group of 77 and China proposal. Now, we had a contact group, which is a negotiating space established for this negotiation, and this group convened on the 12th of November, co-chaired by two representatives, two delegates, one from developed, one from developing countries. We had Federica Fricano from Italy for the developed countries, and the other co-chair was Joseph Teo of Singapore. Now, the co-chairs proposed that the negotiations begin with an informal note, a document that was actually developed at the substar meetings, the subsidiary body meetings held in June in Bonn of this year. Now, that meeting identified three main areas that the work should proceed. The first being the question of how the Just Transition Work Program, or JTWP as it's being called, should advance work, whether through improving existing modalities using an existing mechanism, or whether a new institution, a new modality, or a new institutional arrangements were needed. And then, of course, there is always the decision to defer it to a future time. Of course, parties concerned have no interest in deferring this, seeing as they propose that it's needed. The second thing is the manner in which the high-level messages from these two dialogues, now a couple of dialogues were held, should be reflected in the Just Transition Work Program decisions. This is always a matter of quite contentious negotiation because the manner in which message is transmitted in the negotiations is often as important, if not more important, than the message itself. And then finally, the third area, a placeholder on promoting international cooperation, which is related to existing mechanisms, and addressing the concerns with climate change related to trade restrictive unilateral measures, or UTMs. So the developing countries have identified that unilateral trade restrictive measures do play an important role in the achievement of the just transition. And this linkage was highlighted and regarded as something that needs to be focused on as we progress on the negotiations. The Group 77 and China requested that discussions begin with focus on institutional arrangements, simply because the parties needed more time to digest all the material coming out from the dialogues. And most parties actually supported this request. But Japan, on the other hand, did raise a concern and asked for a line-by-line negotiation in order to focus on controversial issues. Now, you need to understand that when a party calls for a line-by-line negotiation, essentially that is a tactic that is used basically to bog the negotiations down. Because in most cases, these documents are several pages in length, and as individual lines are put up on the screen and negotiated, it's always a protracted negotiation. You can find parties proposing everything from changing a single word, changing punctuation, calling for a rearrangement of the text in that particular line. But in any case, the call for a line-by-line negotiation is often perceived as delaying tactic moving forward. So, of course, the parties by consensus then agreed that was a bit unreasonable, and parties actually agreed to begin deliberations on how this mechanism should work. Now, as I mentioned, a number of parties took the floor in very, very strong support of this. Chile took the floor for the Association of Independent Latin American Countries. Tanzania took the floor for the Africa Group, saying the mechanism must contribute to sustainable development, it must promote clean cooking and access to energy, these are key issues in Africa, and enhance climate resilience, the topic that we'll be talking about today. This was echoed by the least developed countries, and Ethiopia spoke for them, the LDCs. The idea really was that we how to improve the existing modalities of the Just Transition Work Program, and these are not mutually exclusive to the proposal of establishing a new institutional arrangement. So the least developed countries understanding that even if we have a new mechanism, a new institutional arrangement, this new mechanism needs to dovetail and work in an integrated fashion with all of the existing mechanisms dealing with some of the issues that are standing out. The like-minded developing countries were represented by Saudi Arabia, and they indicated that the mechanism would provide coherent, action-oriented and inclusive support for implementing nationally defined just transition pathways. The idea being with the right to development should include international cooperation and multilateralism as at its core. These are calls, if you will recall, that have been echoed by the presidency of the COP as we talk about using multilateralism to establish a stronger momentum towards low carbon growth. Interestingly, also, the Association of Small Island States, represented by Fiji, quite naturally looked for this new mechanism to actually help transitioning away from fossil fuels. They made reference to the International Court of Justice, or the ICJ's advisory opinion that they issued, mentioning that global energy transition is up to this point a massive challenge. And this was one reason why the work program needs to ensure that the transition is just. India also weighed in individually, not as part of a group, but it indicated that a new transition mechanism would allow parties to move beyond just discussions and actually would create the space for exploring concrete pathways in which the transition could be implemented. Now, understandably, the developed countries were more interested in trying to keep hammering at existing mechanisms, to try to use existing mechanisms for this purpose. Switzerland, for the Environmental Integrity Group, said that no, they could use existing modalities instead of new ones. This is what they were supported by the UK, saying that there were two questions that remain unanswered. What would the function of this new mechanism be, and what value add would there be, given that there are some existing initiatives already in place for causes like this. Japan called once again for a mapping of all existing initiatives. So this call to avoid duplication. Once again, it's a call for more work, a call for more complexity before we move into actions. This delaying tactic was also used by Australia, talking about needing to see a strong link between the just transition and the ambition mechanism, meaning that it wanted to say, well, if you want a just transition, we need to see more ambition from the developing world. And so this is another linkage that is used to conditionalize or to condition any action that might accelerate the just transition. Canada also saying that this proposal generated far more questions than it did answers. Once again, a tactic to slow things down and an argument against establishing a fit-for-purpose mechanism to adjust the just transition. Now, we had some NGOs weighing in on this particular issue. The trade union NGOs or the Tangos, they were speaking for cross constituencies. And this represents the environmental NGOs, the women's and gender and children and youth NGOs. They called for a step change in the way the NFCCC, the UNFCCC, is delivering on just transitions, and they supported the G77 and China developing countries on a call to establish a Belém action mechanism for the just transition, or a BAM. And they said that this would accelerate, consolidate, and achieve a holistic and just transition within and between countries. So the G77 and China drawing support from the NGO groups for this just transition mechanism. Apart from that, there were a number of sub-events that are also being followed quite closely. Just to mention them in passing so that you can look for them on your particular COP30 feeds. The Indigenous Peoples and NDCs 3.0 Rights Recognition and Way Forward. This is something that's being supported by the Indigenous peoples who see that they need to be involved in the development of the NDCs within the countries in which they live, as well as the implementation of the NDC. So in increasing the role, increasing inclusiveness for Indigenous peoples. Also, the high-level meeting of the Baku Dialogue on Water and Climate Action, once again calling attention to the very, very strong linkage between climate impacts and the need for water as a very, very basic human right. Of course, water cross-cutting for necessities, for sanitation, for the economy, and one of the resources at greatest risk from climate impacts. Also, a focus on biodiversity and climate policy. We've got a group now looking at trade-offs and synergies between protecting and conserving biodiversity. And then finally, among the sub meetings going on, something about tracking evaluation and learning to better adapt. Now, this is a francophone perspective, meaning that it involves the Africa group and the idea that there should be a strong linkage between adaptation, the global goal on adaptation in particular, and the agricultural sector. So once again, there's a lot of concern at the COP for all of these nexuses. I'm not sure what the plural for nexus is, but these meeting points, these points at which key issues involving resource availability that are impacted by climate change and come together. In this case, the agriculture, water, and indigenous group nexus. So all of these things going on at the COP right now, our respective negotiators probably being pushed to the limit in terms of trying to strengthen the positions of their respective countries, their respective coalitions in pushing forward under the guidance of the Brazilian presidency. I see now that we're at 8:22. I'm gone a little bit over. I apologize for that, but we'll continue to bring updates from the COP as we move along. And right now, I'd like to welcome our special guest this morning, who will join me in talking about the concept of resilience. We have Dr. Yogi Chellappan from Think City, who is fresh off the plane from a trip to Johor, I understand, where they were looking at the role of some plantings and greening of alleyways, right? In particular using bamboo and some other crops. Welcome to our coverage of COP30 parallel coverage, Dr. Yogi. It's a pleasure to have you. I'd like to first of all begin by pointing out that adaptation and resilience are often conflated. They're sometimes confused, and people fail to understand sometimes what the linkage, the actual linkage is between the words adaptation and the concept of resilience as a very broad concept. Now, you've been with Think City for a while now, and Think City, I think, has established itself as one of the organizations that is actually putting resilience on the ground in many parts of Malaysia. At the very high level, I'd like to ask you to explain Think City's approach to the concept of resilience. Is it something that still remains very qualitative, meaning that we can talk about it but only in qualitative terms, or are there actually quantitative metrics that people can look at and kind of wrap their brains around that are now being applied to this concept of resilience? Dr. Yogi?
Thank you so much, Gary. Thank you to Climate Governance Malaysia as well for this opportunity. A very good question. So you did touch on adaptation and resilience. Just a quick sharing what I know between the both, because all this term is relatively new. We also trying to understand actually by implementing project on ground and also working with the community. So but adaptation is mainly on preparing and responding to climate change, while resilience is about building a stronger and more sustainable system. So at high level, Think City view resilience as capacity of the cities and community to anticipate and also adapt to the shocks and stresses, whether it can be environmental or actually from the social element or even economic element as well, while maintaining very important function and improving the life of the community. So our approach has been holistic all this while. We also bring in system thinking to all our ongoing big programs or even a small projects, because it's very important to understand how urban infrastructure, governance, and also ecosystem, and also most importantly community interact with each other. So in Think City Resilience is addressed through integrated system approach. So some guiding principle are how we implement those resilient in our project. Firstly, I can share with you through nature-based or climate responsive solution, or even people centric design, co-curate with the community or the stakeholder, very important. But most importantly, institutional integration, because in a higher level, policy and also governance is important when you talk about in a holistic way. So one of the example I can give is ongoing project in Penang is through urban greening grants. So we do provide greening grants to the community, to the stakeholder, to green up their facade or rooftop, because heat is going to be one major issue especially in Southeast Asia. And the other example what I can give you is what Penang Island Local Council is implementing at this moment. They just started 2 months ago. It's more on built infrastructure, new 3-line streets, canopy, connected canopy is being implemented in a certain zone of Georgetown. And as you know, Georgetown also is a UNESCO area. So there's some limitation. With some limitation, we do try to be innovative and bring all this resilient element to it. To answer your question, I understand while resilient is initially described as quantitative, so for example, community well-being, adaptive capacity. So at Think City we do have a result framework, so there's a target for us to achieve through quantitative metrics. So we do have a very strong monitoring, evaluation and learning framework under this program. Also in collaboration with UN Habitat as a project manager, and also other implementing partners, the local Penang Island Local Council, and also DID, JPS, Penang State. So some example I can share, the indicators is reduction in surface temperature. When, for example, just now I mentioned through urban green grass, we can reduce some temperature. Flood risk, reduce runoff water level. When you talk about social, number of beneficiary from improved adaptive capacity. So we do have preparedness, especially on heat toolkit. We do a lot of trainings with the targeted group, vulnerable groups. So we do have some indicator for us to for us to as a guide. So this is quite important. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is very interesting that you point out that when you approach the issue of resilience, the ideas of being holistic and systems should be at the center of this. I think a part of the reason why we perhaps fall into habits that might result in poor planning and poor preparedness to address some of these climate change issues, which can be very complex, are areas where we actually fail to understand the impacts of our own actions. For example, when we straighten drainage structures, we inadvertently reduce the amount of water storage that we have, and some of the constructions that we've done, some of the adaptive measures taken here in KL have shown this now. The idea that a river or a drainage system isn't merely the channel through which water finds its way from where the rain is falling to where the sea is, but that structure itself has huge storage potential. The water's someplace that the water's got to be, and And just from a geometric perspective, we can understand that something that meanders and curves back and forth traces a much longer pathway, and therefore, maintaining it in that particular state maintains the volume of water that it would hold. And many times, what happens when we, linearize all of these drainage pathways, we just end up reducing the storage capacity of that drainage, and then what happens is we do have a spillover into other areas. Also very interesting that you bring together in this large system the fact that you've got your urban infrastructure, you've got your community, the biodiversity that is part of it, and then the community where you actually bring them in to help co-create, co-curate, co-implement these measures. I think is very, very important. And I think that the last thing that you mentioned that really struck me was the idea that what you are setting up is you are building a learning organization. You're actually building a learning community. The toolkits and all are just amazing. I think the idea that communities can actually begin to think about the kind of surroundings that they ultimately want, and then be a part of designing that, I think is interesting, and going all the way down to metrics, of course, very, very, very hard and fast way of measuring progress. I know that Think City, you have, of course, a very strong presence on the ground in I don't know if I should call it your stronghold in Penang, but what I'd like to explore now is how you just mentioned you came back from Johor. How much of a role does the existing ecosystem, and I mean that very broadly, the local government system, the presence of the community, maybe civil society activity in the area, maybe even the relationship between institutions like schools, universities, etc. How strong do you think an association exists? What is the role of all these in facilitating the greening and the increased resilience of cities? Is it important when you go to a place, you have better traction when you find that there is already a sort of welcoming environment and an enabling environment that's already in place? And how would that then affect your ability to bring in and to introduce some of these measures? Would you be able to talk a little bit about where Think City is working, not just in Peninsular Malaysia, if you're also working already in Sabah and Sarawak and in other parts of ASEAN? Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I think, Gary, it's very important for us to bring all the actor to when you're implementing a project, we do emphasize the importance. Partnership is always our key in Think City, so we don't duplicate efforts. We want to complement what is ongoing, or even brainstorm to make it a better project, while bringing nature-based solution, or in terms of reducing heat or flood. So we do have very strong what we always play as a neutral party, bringing everybody together. That is our important role. So to not to duplicate any effort. So, for example, in Penang, we do work a lot, quite number of stakeholder and also community group. We bring in, for example, last year we did a Youth Climate Summit, Southeast Asia. So there's almost more than 10 collaborators came together to make this summit successful. So this summit is, the idea is to create awareness in terms of adaptation to the young students. Especially our focus in Penang was from the vulnerable family community, the students, those who are from B40. So it's, I think, because when you talk about the vulnerable community, they are most likely to be exposed to all this information or knowledge because of their social economic status. So we worked along with Penang Green Council to bring all this group together, and we did a 5 days program in one of the partners venue as well. And also we did collaborate with the Wild Center from United States. So they came all the way. So this last year they selected Penang as a host country. So it's an annual summit actually. So for example, another example what I want to give you is there's a pocket park that has been implemented by the Penang Island Local Council. So in terms of access to essential services, so when you talk about community, it's very important to ensure this pocket park used to be a bare land and it was not safe, especially when you talk about women and walking through, in the night, especially there's no proper lighting and, it was not safe. So creating this kind of pocket park, which more inclusive, especially when you talk about gender component to it. So this some example that I can also share with you what our partners are currently implementing. And also when I also shared earlier, when you talk about the toolkit preparedness in terms of flood or heat stress, heat wave, I think it's very important for us to introduce to schools as well, as a early measurement now already, part of their curriculum or whatsoever. So we're also working closely through Sustainable School program by introducing this kind of training to the young kids. Most importantly on the heat wave. I think heat wave is something new still in Malaysia, that a lot of effort is being made, but I think we need to also see how best we can look at the long-term impact as well. So long-term impact also is important, not only metrics, indicator and so on, target and so on, but we in Think City we also give quite important in terms of impact assessment as well. So any programs, once it's ended, we do have impact assessment, because for example build project, you need time for the tree or for the green facade roof to grow and so on. So you need to give some time to measure the impact as well, also bringing the community element to it. The other part in terms of economic, what I can share is when you talk about asset and infrastructure protection, so we also do see how many numbers of buildings being retrofitted in terms of facade or rooftop, because in Georgetown there was a limitation when you talk about heritage, right? You can't, if it's level 1 or 2 of heritage, you can't can't touch the facade or rooftop. So we do work along with community or the owner of the building, how best we can retrofit certain ideas to reduce the temperature. So most importantly, I also mentioned gender element is quite important in any of our programs. So how many women in terms of participating, but not only in terms of number, are they going beyond taking the leadership role to any of the decision making when it comes to climate impacts? That's quite important. I think we need to try to emphasize as well, because when you talk about house, I think women also spending most of their time in kitchen, so that creates extra heat when you talk about it, right? So I think it's quite important for them to know, and also preparedness in terms to prepare their children or their parents, old age and so on. So I think it's very important for them to be a decision maker when you talk about climate impacts as well.
Yeah, thank you very much. All that is very, very insightful. And the role of Think City as a convener, I think is very, very important. We also find that role true for us at Climate Governance Malaysia. I think the idea that that we have all these climate impacts on the one hand, which is a bit of a macro picture coming in and sort of imposing on the built environment as well as the suburban environment, together with as it were what we've already put in place. The idea being that a lot of our infrastructure was actually designed for conditions that existed in the past, and to actually work with the then policies, including things like the transportation policy, including things like the energy policy, the land use policy, and of course this is vital in a place like Penang. Of course, you're an island, you can't really increase the land, and if you want to go into things like reclamation, then there also are repercussions. It's always a trade-off. Where if you want more land, then you have to give something up. How much do you see this changing when you move from Penang, trying to implement something, say in Johor or in some other part of the world? How do you engage with how do you identify, first of all, and then engage with the local decision makers, and maybe even the entities and authorities that have are already saying, look, we are already implementing this. We have this flood mitigation policy, we've got this budget, we've got this implementation phases, and we are delivering on all of these KPIs. And do you find that on occasion that they can actually be single-minded and come back to you and say, look, we're already doing all of this, we've already got a full plate, and we are delivering on our KPIs. If you come in and with all of these ideas that you have, you actually interfere with the implementation of these things. How do you raise the possibility of collaborative efforts? Look, you can, even as you meet your own KPIs, this is a way perhaps that you could improve and have a KPI plus an additional deliverable. Is this an engagement that Think City is involved in?
Yes, we do that quite a lot with most of the local council that we are working with. So we always, Gary, we always start with baseline to understand the city context, in terms of the land use. As you mentioned, there's so many elements to it. So just to understand, because every city has a different typology, for example, right? So yes, so they come with different climate risk. For example, Shah Alam, it's more flooded, right? It's just low lying area and so on. In Penang, in Georgetown, for example, it's more heat because there's less green element to the to the town. So different city has a different solution, I would say. We do work hand on hand with the local council. First of all, we try to understand the typology of the city by doing a baseline. So there's a process, there's a methodology that in Think City where we use. We bring in GIS and all this data is very important for us to understand. Okay. Yeah, so we do that baseline to understand. Then we try to build the network with the local council. Not easy, I would say, because it's a kind of capacity building for them as well. I think one gap we noticed with local council, some they already are quite overwhelmed with their ongoing work, right? So they have quite, as you said, they got quite number of target to achieve, under the federal, under the state, and so on. So we'll try to come to help them how best that we can, when you talk about from the climate element, how best they can actually see in a different angle, because for us, we also do bring in all the policies at the ministerial level, especially when you talk about the Ministry of Environment. I think they are working on MyNAP, which they're going to launch next year, I guess. So very important to prepare all this local council to towards MyNab as well. So we do a lot of capacity building. We do bring quite a number of experts for them to understand the knowledge on adaptation, especially nature-based solution, or even sponge city concept and so on. So we do that kind of workshop along with them. So co-curation is always a must in Think City. We don't want to bring in new element to it. We try to work what they have ongoing initiative. We try to improve it, and climate element should complement, when you talk about preparedness and so on, infrastructure or even community social wise. So this has always been our approach, and we try to close the gap. And also we notice, some agency, they are so focused on their work, they begin to work in silos. So we bring all this government agency together and find the solution together, because perhaps at that area, for example, I would say at the river area, it's under DID JPS, but also there's some area is governed by the local council. So we try to bring both parties together and see how best we can bring a best solution to that particular area when there's a climate risk. So this is some example that I can give how Think City approach the stakeholders.
I was also struck by when you raised the issue of implementation taking time. And with the climate emergency, the last thing we have is time. But time is so important, because we, even as we think about things like, if you don't start something, then you can't take advantage of time. But the sooner you start something, for example, just plant a seed.
Yeah.
If you plant a seed, then you can kind of forget about it and let sort of time be your friend. And on the other hand, if you don't do anything, obviously, then waiting for things to change is not going to work. But I was struck by the fact that time is part of this, and when we think about resilience, we almost cannot help but think of a phased approach that requires both sort of not just current thinking, but mid-term and long-term thinking. And just using Penang as an example, because I grew up there. Of course, it's very different now from what it used to be. But thinking into the future on key resilience issues, like food security, for example, like water security, for example. What are some of the notions and ideas that Think City is introducing to the authorities? You've mentioned a few already: the Penang Island Local Council, the PICC, the UN Habitat, Penang Green Council, to encourage them to think long term. Because of course, if you have, it's only if you have a long-term goal out there that you can begin to assess whether you are actually moving towards it and will ultimately achieve it, or you are moving in the wrong direction that will sort of eliminate that possibility that you want in the future. Because all of the millions of ringgit of infrastructure expenditure on local initiatives, whether good and bad, whether it's pocket parks or whether it's new shopping malls, okay, all of these things determine whether you are moving towards that long-term goal of being able to have a quality of life, health, water and food security, etc. So what are some perhaps ideas that Think City brings to increase awareness among all of these stakeholders about long-termism and the importance of thinking very, very far ahead?
Yeah, I think currently they do have their target, they do have quite a number of plans, 2025, 2030, from KPKT, or, a lot of, so we do try to complement those target by bringing climate risk, but most importantly, from our current pinning program, also known as PNB CAP, this program is meant to scale to different city. Yeah, so because we're supposed to share all this knowledge and lesson learned from this program, because it's one of the first program when you talk about climate adaptation or nature-based solution. It is one of the first program that we are implementing together with MBPP and JPS. So from this, so under PNB CAP, Think City, we have actually established what called as Malaysian Adaptation Sharing Hub. Yeah. So last year we launched this. So almost, and we also partner is very important partnership. We partner with GCOM for this, and we bring almost, I think, more than 10 local council throughout Malaysia, including Sabah Sarawak, to Penang last year, to share the progress of the Penang program. And also we did bring knowledge partners from China to share the expertise when you talk about spawn city and so on. So very interesting, Gary. What I want to share is, of course, with intense rainfall, with shorter time, there's a lot of water, but very interesting point that this expert, Professor Nyansa, shared is the rooftop also is a major. Yes. So
storage,
this kind of storage. So this kind of very small information, but it was very powerful for us to understand. When you talk about holistic will, earlier you talk about the capacity of the drainage, right? So to slow down the flow from the rooftop, through rain garden, even by just building a rain garden. So it's a very simple intervention, but very powerful knowledge, I would say. So this is some intervention that he shared. So we have these cities, almost more than 10 cities. They are part of the first cycle cohort of this MASH. We call MASH. And we've been, after the workshop, we've been following up. So the intention is for all this local council to come up with at least 2 initiatives or 2 policies in their own city when you talk about climate adaptation or nature-based solution. So we do guide them through online, one-to-one, mainly one-to-one. So recently we had a second session this year online. We're happy to see there's some progress to it. So we can see some local council already thinking long-term and trying to bring in the adaptation element to their project. For example, Kota Kinabalu, when they shared their initiative, we were so impressed that they have ongoing. They got a project in pipeline where they coastal area where they already bring in nature-based solution to it. And another example is Segamat. They have this very interesting one aircon 1-3 concept. So it was very motivating to see this kind of changes among the local council, because we do also ask them the question, does whatever the workshop that we are doing, because we want to improve as well. So they do mention that this kind of workshop under MESH is very important for them to understand the concept of adaptation, resilient, nature-based solution, so they can go back and think in a, as a long-term planning and so on. So some example I can give, we might be having a second cycle probably next year. So more city to join this network, because we want to, amplify the effort on adaptation is very important at this moment. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. I note that we've got about 6 minutes left. Just like to alert the listeners, thank you so much for joining us, that we do have a Q&A box, and if you'd like to very quickly put your questions in the Q&A box, we'll see if Dr. Yogi will be able to answer them for you. In the last few minutes that we have, perhaps the role of the private sector. I mean, of course, this is where they do their business, they live, they commute, they meet. What in your role, what in your opinion, in your view, your experience, is the role of the private sector in this? Are they merely, a compliance based a group that look at, oh, okay, I want to do this business. If I want to do this business here, then these are all the rules I have to follow. If I want to have my office here, then these are all the rules I have to follow. Or do you see the private sector actually being an active player, being more involved in communicating what it is that they actually need to run their businesses? For example, do they come to the council and say, look, our business requires X cubic meters of water a month, and willing to work with you to try to make sure that continues to be available? Or is this something that is still too isolated? Everyone's still sort of working separately and not communicating?
Well, for example, what I can give, we had maybe two example I can give, very small intervention and big. We worked with Micron Foundation recently to come up with a resilience strategy for Penang. So we do have the support from the private sector in Penang. So the strategy was launched early this year. So there's some support to it and all those stuff. So we brought up quite a number of private sector, especially the MNCs, when you talk about Bayang Lepas and Batu Kawan, right? So they do come together to the ongoing effort. They do acknowledge, this climate impacts, especially in Penang, when Penang is an island, right? So they do acknowledge that, this effort need to be done and so on. So we already come up with a strategy. So this kind of discussion, very high level discussion, how this private sector can support some of the intervention by both local council, Penang Island also Seberang Prime, because we do have industrial area at both areas, Batu Kawan and Bayang Lepas. That's on a high level. Yeah, we can see a support from that side. The small intervention, what example that I can share is from Penang program, is through the grants, urban green grants. We do have interest from the private sector. They also want to apply for the grants, but we do emphasize co-funding. So they become as another financial, there's another financial mechanism, PPP. They do put in some their own, financial funding to green up their facade and roof. So we do emphasize co-funding is quite important especially when you talk about private sector. So the acknowledgement on the climate risks, again, they aware that what need to be done. They fully understand, especially green up is to reduce the temperature and making sure it's very inclusive for their own employees and so on, especially when they have vulnerable community working in their properties and so on. So this is another example I can share. So we do have interest, not in a major level, but there's some, so it's quite motivating to see how all this actor coming along as well through this. So the other example I would say, so throughout Malaysia we do have quite a number of other projects that we are implementing. So for example, you did mention Batu Pahat in Yong Peng, very small town, but also there's a lot of interest from the local council, and I think I'm proud to say they now fully understand what is climate adaptation is and what is nature-based solution is. So we can see some changes in terms of their master plan, so on. So I'm hoping for all these local councils to do some changes in terms of the master plan. We do have some projects in Kuala Kangsar, because Kuala Kangsar is quite unique. It's a royal town, heritage, culture, high in culture, but also there's I think they are quite famous for the terracotta, the Labu Sayong.
Yes.
So very interesting to see how this nature culture nexus coming along, and also Shah Alam, as you know, it's a quite quite crucial for us to address the flood issues there. Hopefully there's some project in upcoming years in this kind of so as I said, we are trying to scale all this knowledge, all this sharing pilot project and so on for all the cities across of Malaysia.
Dr. Yogi, it's been a pleasure to have you. I've learned so much from you. Yeah, this one aircon, one tree concept, I think is a very powerful idea.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for agreeing to join us on this session, this webinar session. We really appreciate your input and wish you all the best at Think City as you continue to green the rest of Malaysia, starting with the cities and then moving to the rest of the country. Ladies and gentlemen, no questions, but I'll take that as a sign that you've actually been able to grasp and understand all the things that Dr. Yogi's been talking about. Thank you very much for joining us again. Do continue to join us as we continue our coverage of events at COP30 in Belém in Brazil, and to mirror the discussions, ongoing thematic discussions going on at the Malaysia Pavilion at COP30. Once again, thank you, Dr. Yogi. It's been a distinct pleasure. Back to you, Aaron.
A heartfelt thank you to Dr. Gary and Dr. Yogi for the insightful discussion on this extremely important topic. We would now like to move on to the next section, which will be the C-Suite's highlight. This will be moderated by the CEO of EUROCham, Mr. Karl Godderis, together with Mr. Khoon Yean, Managing Partner of PwC Malaysia. The floor is yours for the both of you.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you very much, Aaron. A warm welcome every day for the CGM COP events and for round 3 of our daily C-Suite highlights on sustainability, where we talk with senior business leaders in Malaysia about their views on sustainability. Today we have Khoon Yean, who is the managing partner of PwC Malaysia. Good morning, Suhu, and welcome to the discussion.
Good morning, Karl.
I look forward to this. So today's topic,
definitely.
overall theme is resilience. We're going to break that down in a more detailed level, focusing on strengthening infrastructure resilience, water security, and food supply continuity through innovation. But Suhoon, before we talk about these more technical topics, I want to start with a slightly more personal angle. I would like to ask you, when growing up, how were you exposed to nature and the environment? And how do you think this has impacted your sense of responsibility for the younger generation, and also the way you handle sustainability
in
your business decisions?
Yeah, thank you, Karl. Maybe I'll just start off with giving a bit of background on my younger age. I've been in a family that travels across Malaysia because my father was a civil servant. So I've been to many cities, including living in Singapore. And in the young days, I was in Taipei. The Taipei Lake was a beautiful lake, garden with a lot of old trees. And it gives you the sense of what nature beauty is as a young boy. And I really think that this must be maintained. But more importantly is that when I was in Singapore as a teenager, I was exposed to about the water shortage, the dependency on water by Singapore to Malaysia, and we exposed to the issue behind what are the restrictions, because if you have a water shortage, it is a form of strategic resource. Never did I dream that water, which seems to be something so easily accessible in a tropical country like Singapore, that you have water shortage. And that gives me a sense of that, hey, nothing can be taken for granted. And you need a long-term strategic view in terms of managing some of these strategic resources for your own society. So to me, these are the two, probably amongst many highlights in my young age that shaped my view about sustainability during my adult years.
Well, excellent example, and I think it dovetails well with the topics of this discussion. So, therefore, talking about infrastructure resilience and water security and food supply continuity, what would you say is currently on those areas the state of play in Malaysia, both from a government and private sector point of view? And since you work for an international company with strong regional footprints, how would you Malaysia compares to the surrounding countries on those areas?
Yeah, I would like to say that Malaysia have laid a lot of important groundwork. We have laid a very good foundation surrounding policies like National Energy Transition Roadmap. We do have a national food security blueprint as well. So if you were to look at some of the elements of the blueprint, we have actually laid the foundation what it takes to ensure that we have a sustainable food security. So like for example, in the case of food security, Malaysia in 2020, which I didn't realize, we have 60% of our food is imported, notwithstanding that we are an agriculture country. So this means that it is important for us to consider what are the things that we can do to improve productivity in terms of our agricultural products. But along the way, as I expose to my clients and what I see around the market, I also get to know that there are a lot of private initiatives surrounding deploying data analytics to help farmers to decide and match the demand and supply in terms of the agricultural produce. So which I came across one in East Malaysia where they actually try to educate the farmers on what are the expected demand of which vegetables, which food produce that will have the demand or potential shortage, and they will use those data to guide what are the planting strategies. So in my mind, I think this is all well and good, but I do believe that one of the most important element, which is in the national food security, which we hope we can implement much more effectively, will be the public-private partnership. Because in essence, to drive such a policy, you need money, and you can't have only a one-sided perspective to drive an effective implementation of such policy. You need the government support in terms of incentives, and tax breaks to encourage innovation in this space, but at the same time, the private companies or the private sector must be able to see the need of such opportunity and invest accordingly and strategically.
And do you think, since we just finished the ASEAN summit, which has put Malaysia quite on the forefront, has that elevated the comparison with other countries on those topics? And if so, where do you think, if you compare Malaysia on these areas with, say, Thailand or Indonesia, so what is your view or your experience?
I think we are strong in our policy intent. We are ahead in ASEAN in terms of our progress. Incidentally, for my case, I have a role to play in countries like Vietnam and Thailand as well. So I got the opportunity to see what's there. But I think Malaysia and many parts of the Southeast Asian countries have the right policy intent, but we need a longer time to reach what we want to achieve, simply because I think there is a need to ensure that there is a will for the government to work closely with the private sector to achieve the goals in a much more coordinated way. One of the biggest challenge and limitation in Southeast Asian countries generally is that coordination is an area that can be improved. Policy intent has always been there. Energy transition is a known thing. You look at Indonesia, you look at Thailand, you look at Malaysia, notwithstanding we are a net oil exporter, you find that the biggest challenge is always that you do have a structural issue. Things like Malaysia, subsidy, and the driving the balance between using solar energy and the costs. That is where some of the challenges are. The government needs money and the private sector to support some of these initiatives, because the governments in Southeast Asia generally would not have all the resources available to drive the policy that they intended to execute.
Okay. Now, when we talk about resilience, there seems to be a general consensus that, considering the complexity of dealing with resilience, doing more of the same is not going to make it, and therefore there has to be an important focus on innovation. So PwC, as a global advisory firm, where do you stand, or how are you involved in that part of the resilience discussion, if you like? How important is innovation, a topic for PwC to profile itself on resilience.
So thanks, Carl, for that. I think one of the things that I set our firm to do is that you can't speak and advise on sustainability, or even before we talk about innovation, is that you must walk the talk. Meaning the firm must execute what they advise the clients on, and continue and double down on investments in this area. It's easy to talk about things like, for example, achieving net zero by 2030 or 2040. But what is more important is that a firm like us must be able to invest in talent that can develop ideas in relation to sustainability. And the ideation that comes out from this talent, it should not be applied to clients alone, but use it to apply to ourselves. For example, if I were to develop a climate risk modeling solution, then I must be able to apply that to a firm like ours. Notwithstanding, of course, as a service provider, you find that the modeling tend to be a little bit more simplified because the variables are less. But you got to use it on yourself before you are able to apply to others. So that is the first step. But having said that, I think increasingly we find that one of the biggest challenge for an area like sustainability, the topics are very wide. The people that is involved in energy transition is not necessarily the same person that deal with biodiversity, for example. So in order to do so, the second stage is that you must be able to hire people with deep expertise to advise the clients on, and you need a regional platform to do that. So the second stage that we have done is that we don't invest in these talents alone, but we are able to invest in these talents as a region, I think notably in Southeast Asia. And using this talent to develop models like climate risk models, we also have we build up a team in the CPNI business, the people that is involved in capital and infrastructure practice, to advise on and build up financial model to ensure that the ideation and the initiative in relation to sustainable is sustainable financially, building up a credible financial model. So in essence, it's all about bringing competency in the topics in relation to sustainability, but using the expertise that we traditionally have, especially in the area of financial modeling, to support the sustainability initiative for clients. Because more often than not, I think, which we can talk a little bit more later, is that one of the biggest impediment for corporates or society or government to implement sustainability ideas is about money, right? The cost can be inherently expensive. The benefit can be inherently much more longer tail, which sometimes more often than not, corporate may not necessarily have that appetite. How do we then bridge the gap? And that calls for innovation, and that calls for innovative financial products to be able to sustain that. And that's where the firm can come in.
Yeah. This is getting interesting. I want to continue on this topic, but playing a little bit devil's advocate here, because obviously yourself, you have an assurance background within the broader firm, if I'm correct, although now you represent the whole organization, so there's a strong component of consulting there. But in recent fora that I'm participating with, you hear a lot people saying, look, the whole sustainability focus has gotten so much into the area of compliance and reporting and not enough on action. And actually, as recent as this morning, I read in the Financial Times in their COP coverage an article about a very deep survey they had done recently globally across large organizations about the role of the chief sustainability officer, where they see a clear trend that in many cases that role is being downgraded no longer to a chief, but to a head of sustainability, and many cases actually integrated either in the finance teams or in audit teams, because the focus is primarily moving towards gathering correct data for compliance and reporting purposes. Now, within the discussion on net zero and decarbonization, to a degree, that's understandable that companies say, look, we at least need to have that information covered. But if we break it open to a debate on biodiversity and resilience, which is so much more than decarbonization, then suddenly the discussion becomes more strategic. And so I'm really curious, given the focus of your organization, how do you maneuver your clients in this discussion, saying, look, sustainability is not just about assurance, although assurance is a big part of your business. It's also about strategy, and that actually relates to long-term assurance, right? Because you say that just now, it's a lot of money for a long-term benefit, but that includes long-term assurance over whether or not we can operate as a company and so forth, right? And yeah, given PwC's global position, but also in Malaysia, particularly your bigger client, how do you maneuver that debate from them just wanting to have an assurance focus towards one which is more strategically focused?
Thank you, Karl. This has always been an ongoing debate. I'm going to make a slightly controversial statement as a starting point, is that one of the view I hold strongly on is that the biggest challenge for corporate Malaysia as a whole, or to an extent in many corporate around the world, is that CEOs tend to have a short-term view because of a 2-year contract or a 3-year contract. That goes just not aligned to how you see sustainability as a topic for the corporate. Because for example, you need to give you an example. Oil palm plantation company. If you have, which by the way is a public information, if you have a lot of plantation along the west coast of Malaysia, 50 years from now, you find that the land is going to be submerged if you don't do something. If you are a 3-year CEO, would you invest in that? Because the issue is 30 years from now. Unless you make it the goal of the board and institutionalize in the long-term strategic vision and resilient strategy of the company, no one is going to act on that. Because sustainability impact is not short-term. It eats into you minute by minute. You don't see it coming, but if you take a 5-year horizon, you can see that. So how do you get that behavioral change? So for me, I think the first thing first is that the board must be able to see what are some of the challenges in each of the organization they are in relation to sustainability. Reporting is an enabler, in my view. Today, if I were to say 70% of the new IFRS standards that are coming, or as exposure draft, there is an element on sustainability consideration. Why is that so? Because it affects business. It affects your replacement cost in terms of the asset that you have, the machine and equipment that you have. It shortens the asset lifespan potentially because of changes required by regulation. So over time, I would say that corporate reporting first and foremost allows or encourage behavioral change because it reflects what business is all about and what are the business risks. Because sustainability is a new form of business risk, which in turn will affect the way you do financial reporting and reflect the amount, additional capital requirement or replacement cost that you need to do in the next 5 to 10 years, if not 2 years. So back to, if I were to put on a blank piece of paper to a board and say that what needs to be done, the first thing they need to assess is that what they have a fiduciary duty to look beyond their tenure, even as a 9-year director. You have to look at what are the elements to ensure the long-term resilience of companies as a whole. And inevitably sustainability will come into play in one way or another, directly or indirectly. Once everyone has that internalized, then you can set the right goals for the management team, including the CEO. And corporate reporting is just an enabler. But in order to get public trust, then you need assurance. You need to have assurance in the reliability on your numbers. Inherently, you'll find that organizations have not designed to collect sustainability related data. They need to start building up that data lake and the database. And it takes time, and it takes time to get it cleaned up, and therefore progressive assurance of those data is strategically very important, not just for the public information, but it's also for the board, because the board must be in a position to monitor those progress, and so that they are enabled to fine tune what they think the risk will be to the organization in the medium term.
Okay. Come back to that governance issue you referred to in terms of sustainability requires investment and long-term thinking, but CEOs are only hired for 2-3 years. By extension, government representatives are only elected for 2-3 years. So then the question is, who is going to take then the lead on that long-term perspective? And I'm going to tease you a little bit because, as you know, I used to work for PwC many years, and I remember I was always told, once you make partner, your partner for life. So therefore, maybe it's up to organizations like yourself to pull along civic society on that long-term view, and then also put pressure less on the CEOs, but more on the shareholders of the organizations, or if you know what I mean. You have any quick comment on that, if you like?
Well, the comment is that I think there must be initiative to build up education. Right? There must be constant communication within NGOs, society at large, and corporates should also play a part. Because as a firm, I mean, it's not about the long-term viability or the partnership of those. The firm plays a role in society. Firm cannot be just what I call, you only look from, again, just like any typical organization, look at profit making and look at annual report on your profit and loss, because you need to ensure that the society that you are in and the market that you are in continue to be successful and resilient. I mean, using the term that we use in today's theme. In order to make society resilient, then sustainability needs to come in, and it is the duty and the job of private organization, including the firm like ours, to look at how we can play a role in corporate social responsibility, not so much on saying that this is our donation to society, but more importantly is to ensure that the society that we have in order for us to continue to be successful, the society and the market we are in must continue to be resilient, and we need to help people and the public at large to see the need to think long term.
Okay.
And you can see, right, even as a young boy, I was shocked when I hear that a country like Singapore cannot sustain without importing water, despite it's in a tropical country surrounded by water, an island surrounded by water. Right? And that means, and if the government of the day then did not think long term, I don't think they would have invested in some of the innovative long-term water strategy that Singapore government has, or for that matter, even Malaysia.
Yeah, so it shows that it is possible for governments to think long term. And talking about governments, we just had Malaysia's ASEAN presidency. Geopolitical tension is still pretty much out there. And now we have the COP conference, which brings sustainability back to the forefront of things. So what do you see as the most pressing areas for the Malaysian government to navigate through all of this while still keeping sustainability as an important area of focus?
Well, I think to me is that, as I mentioned, Malaysia as a starting point have all the right policy intent. If you were to say that the government does not have a medium-term view on how to make this work, I think they do. I think the challenge has always been what's the cost and what is the short-term impact to society. So that is one area that where the government need to strike the right balance. I give you an example: energy transition. Say if you want to move people from move the society from oil dependency towards more usage of solar, the type of engineers that you need is different. How do you purpose the engineers that you left behind in the oil and gas industry? Unemployment will be an issue if you know in the long term. If you want to deploy technology and robotics in agriculture industry, there will be a societal impact because of employment. You need to put money in terms of upskilling, changing the skills of the people that is being moved out. These are some of the elements where government will need to strike the delicate balance, if you ask me. New area like carbon tax will be an issue. But if you were to talk about a regional collaboration, one of the areas that I feel strongly Malaysia can play a leading role, given that we do have depth in terms of industry and knowledge in sustainability, is on green financing. Green financing is still very, very new in this part of the world. Relatively, not to say we don't have, but I think it's relatively very new. And with the depth of financial sector in Singapore and the diversity in terms of industries around the region, I think we can play a role to ensure that we are able to coordinate and deepen the ability to do green financing. And we all know that cost is a factor. Green financing, therefore, will become strategically important to enable governments to implement sustainability policies in a much more effective manner. I think this will be a wonderful opportunity, if you ask me.
Okay, that's excellent feedback. Now, looking at the clock, so I think we have time for two quick questions on COP30 itself. From my own experience, I've always known PwC at global leadership level to be a bit US-centric. I've noticed, for example, the New York Times doesn't do any reporting on the COP conference, maybe because of the domestic sustainability discussion going on in the US. Is PwC present at the current COP30 conference?
Oh, yes. We even sponsor clients.
Okay, fantastic. And then as a final question, then what does your firm expect from this COP30 conference?
Well, to me, is that we must continue those conversations that we have. I think the COP conference will enable corporate and government to meet and align goals. It is not a one-term thing, right? COP conference has been this is the 30th, is that coming one?
Yes.
30th. Yeah. Right. Yeah. The conversation must continue, right? Bit by bit, we were able to achieve that. And if you were to look at the COP conference, and I know what you mentioned about New York Times, but I hope that this is only a blip, because this is a global issue. It's not the Malaysia issue. It's not the European issue. It's not the Asian issue, or an issue that excludes America. I think this is a global humanity. I think it calls upon all of us to be able to see through that. I'm still hopeful. I'm hopeful that it's just a blip from the US policy perspective. And that's the reason, even as a firm, we believe that we will continue to do what we think is right for society, notwithstanding policies in the US, but perhaps maybe not so publicized, but rest assured, actions and communication and engagement continues.
Okay, that's very good to hear. And on that, I wish we could talk for a few more hours. I'm sure we can fill them easily, but I'm going to hand it back to Aaron. I thank you very much, Suhu, for these very relevant insights you share with us. I'm sure the audience enjoyed it as well. And let's continue the debate at another moment. Thank you very much. And back to you, Aaron.
Thank you, Karl.
Thank you to the both of you for that insightful discussion on this topic. So now we would like to move on to the next part of the program, which is the NGO Pavilion by WWF that has been thoughtfully curated by them. Today's keynote speaker from WWF International, whose name is Mr. Sandeep Chamling Rai from Global Lead IFRC WWF Global Partnerships, will be giving a keynote speech. However, we will be playing a pre-recorded video of him giving the speech. So give us a moment, yes?
Okay. So as we know, the today theme is anchoring the resilience. So firstly, we really need to understand why we are talking about resilience or why we are talking about the climate resilience. So firstly, just to, as we all know, in terms of the background, we know that the use of fossil fuel, especially let's say the oil and the coal, and overconsumption and the pollution, and also the deforestation is leading to greenhouse gas emission. That is really accelerating climate change impact that we are all facing. And if you look what the science is telling or what we have seen so far, we had already committed, let's say, we are above 1.2 degree pre-industrial level in terms of global temperature rise, and we have already committed to 1.5 degree above the pre-industrial level. And the impact that we are seeing right now, or I would say, if we don't really, the projection has shown that we will reach 1.5 if we really don't do drastically emission cut within this decade or so. But the level of impact is really happening everywhere else. But close to our home, let's say in Philippines, for example, the super typhoon is really impacting a lot right now. And the most of the vulnerable, I would say, people and the ecosystem has been devastating. If you look, let's say, in Latin America, where the COP is happening right now in Brazil, the neighborhood country in Jamaica, a lot of super typhoon has really impacted the communities over there as well. So, and this is becoming like a new normal. A lot of the impacts is feeling, or the local community is really feeling the impact. And I would say this is just a tip of the iceberg. Sadly, and we all know, the temperature will rise because we have not drastically reduced our emission that is needed to meet the Paris Agreement global temperature rise. And the NDC that has been put forward by countries just be prior to this COP30 in Belém, or which is coming up, may not be sufficient enough to stabilize our global temperature rise by 1.5 degree. So this is really a critical time. Now, in terms of when we talk about the anchoring the resilience, we really talk about the climate resilience and the disaster resilience. So building the climate resilience and disaster resilience, and for the vulnerable, the people, the community, and the ecosystem. Sometimes it's really hard to distinguish between these two, the climate change impacts or climate change related disaster versus the natural disaster. And there is always a gray area, and there is a lot of, let's say, research has shown that this will really impact. The climate is really triggering the disaster much more frequently, and there is a very gray area, and this will continue to rise. And what we have seen, let's say, in some of the research and some of the finding has shows that the climate and weather related disaster has killed almost 410,000 people only in last decade, from the year 2010 to 2019. And the same study has also shown that almost 30 million people has been displaced along in 2020, and that's a huge. And if you look at the previous IPCC report, especially most of the people will be displaced. It will be in the Southeast Asia region, especially focusing in the Asia because of the massive population, because of the coastal flooding, and because of the sea level rise. So this is an increasing trend, and this will continue to rise if we really don't if we don't really take the extreme measures. The extreme measures means reducing our emission drastically, while as well as, let's say, building the resilience or building the resilience of vulnerable people, community, and the ecosystem. So anchoring the resilience is really a critical theme. Now, for WWF, we are really using the power of nature in terms of to build resilience for the climate and the disaster. So, what we had been really pushing hard and pushing strong is that nature really contributes to triple benefit. The first benefit is about it will really improve the human well-being. It means using the power of nature will really improve the human well-being in multiple front. Second is more it will be help on thriving the biodiversity, and third is more about enhancing the climate change mitigation and adaptation area. So we are using as an organization the power of nature in terms of let's say building resilience. But we also did some study recently, and we had found out that the nature has potential to reduce the intensity of climate and weather-related hazard by at least 26%, which is, I would say, 1/4. And that's a huge, I would say, potential. We cannot really underestimate of that particular potential to reduce the intensity of climate and weather-related disasters by 20%. And it will really save, and we did some financial calculation as well, and it has really said that it could save the developing country of at least 104 billion by 2030, and let's say close to 400 billion by 2050. And that's a huge financial benefit that what we can really leverage from using the power of nature. So on that note, BWWF, we as a global conservation organization, and we has been expertise of working with the nature for the last 6 decades, and we present in 100 countries around the globe. And nature is our inner DNA, so using that competency is one of the key things. But since on the climate change will have both impact on the climate change will really escalate the disaster risk, which is not our, let's say, not our strength. So we really want to partner with the world's largest humanitarian network, which is called International Federation for Red Cross and Red Crescent Society, or the IFRC, who have been working in more than 100, I would say they are working in almost every country in the world, and the vast experience of addressing the disaster. So we are really partnering with the IFRC to work with the nature and to build resilience of vulnerable people and the ecosystem around the globe where we have our footprint presence. And so using the power of nature and addressing the climate and disaster risks was not a brainer for both WWF and IFRC because of a legacy and working on this space. So we took this approach in our partnership and really tried to work together jointly in the let's say around the world where we do have our presence, including in Malaysia, for example. But we do understand that the nature has its own limitation, because nature can be really fruitful if, for example, if we can use the nature on the timely basis, or I would say use on the appropriate place on the right time, using the right kind of nature-based solution approach on a timely manner. So let me quickly go through a presentation that I really want to share some of the work that we do with the IFRC. So we are partnering with the IFRC in terms of how the use of the nature to address the climate change adaptation and also address disaster risks. We are in I would say this is the first cooperation that we had with the IFRC in year 2021, which is we are in the 5th phase. We really want to work at the global level and really try to build the resilience and for the climate impacts and the disaster risks at all places around the globe. We do have 4 pillar of our partnership. We really want to use the people, I would say use our expertise and knowledge, and also educate people that nature really protects people. That's really key. We really want to leverage our mandate in terms of work at the policy level and change and use our expertise in terms of changing national policy. We also really want to scale up joint implementation program in the field. We have been doing a lot of joint project in the field in terms of building climate and disaster resilience. but also we really want to build coalition and resource mobilization to make our joint effort. And we use the nature, I would say, nature-based solution to address the climate disaster. So just to step back and outline what the nature-based solution for climate change adaptation means. So it is, I took this definition from the IFRC, and it basically talks about the action to protect, sustainably manage, and restore natural or modified ecosystem that really address all societal challenges effectively and adaptively, and simultaneously provide the human well-being and the biodiversity benefit. So all the nature-based solution for climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction will really try to attempt the two things. The firstly most is about solving the problem that the society is facing from climate and disaster risks, and secondly is more about improving biodiversity outcome. So these are the, I would say, approach that what we are taking forward. Now, in terms of our work that we are doing in this global partnership, we work. So we are really trying to hit the nexus of climate and disaster risks by working with nature. And we are currently, we have been working in more than 25 countries, including in Malaysia, and a lot of project has been going in the field as of now. Now, let me turn back what we are doing in Malaysia together with our, let's say, Malaysian Red Cross. In Malaysia, for example, we had a MOU signed between WF Malaysia and Red Cross Malaysia in May 2023. Though this is in the very initial stage, but we did some kind of, let's say, capacity building training of, let's say, enhanced vulnerability and capacity assessment in Kedah and Perak. But we are also really trying to develop a joint project with the Red Cross. We also conduct some, let's say, vulnerability assessment in Mabu Island, Sampurna, and Sabah to understand the climate resilience community in that area. But there is a lot of, I would say, activities we are really planning to do with the with Red Cross Malaysia in the coming days, and these are really these are really moving forward. Most probably in the next in this coming calendar year, we will be really implementing joint project on the ground. So that's our work, what we are doing at the global level. A lot of work is in the Asia Pacific. We are really focusing a lot in Malaysia, in Philippines, Indonesia, Nepal, and some of the projects also going to take place in the small and developing states like in Solomon Island and Fiji from this coming calendar year. And a lot of work has been going in the Asia Pacific region and beyond, also in Africa region as well. So lastly, what I would really highlight to say, I really want to highlight is that we use three guiding principles in our intervention to address the climate and disaster risks. And the three guiding principles that we follow, the first is we really want to avoid the harming of the nature. So we really don't want to harm the nature. Secondly is we really want to use the nature to help people to adapt and to adapt with both the climate and disaster risks. And thirdly, we really want nature to adapt by itself so that will have a benefit that will have a benefit for the people and the ecosystem where we are working on. So let me stop there. That's all from my side. Thank you so much.
So, thank you, Mr. Sandeep, since he's here virtually, but we would like to thank him for giving it the chance to present that video to us. So now we'll be moving on to the final segment, which will be the Live from Belém segment. So this segment is curated by the Boston Consulting Group, Singapore, where Mr. Dave Sivaprasad, the Southeast Asia Lead of Climate and Sustainability of the Singapore office, will be leading the session. Without further ado, I'll pass it over to Mr. Dave.
Hi everyone. Hey, so my camera doesn't seem to be working because of some issues. So sorry about that. So we had a sharing yesterday about how the theme of adaptation was very high on the agenda, and nice to see Sandeep also talking about this. It has certainly been a big priority focus here across both public and private sector engagement, adaptation and nature. I think the piece that I would add to what we talked about yesterday is this whole topic about finance and how financial flows can be further unlocked into both energy transition, adaptation, and nature. And there was a lot of discussion at COP, particularly on the action agenda, on what are the enabling mechanisms to create those financial flows. And one topic that was constantly on the agenda was around carbon markets and how this can scale and provide high quality emission reduction options and removals. So it was very much on the agenda over the last day, with many engagements around this, with countries, particularly developing countries with natural assets, were convening a lot of these sessions in the country pavilions and the action agenda sessions and so on. So that was a big topic. Another topic that was of interest, and BCG was quite active here also, was around the role that AI and digital public infrastructure can play in accelerating and scaling energy transition, adaptation, and nature outcomes. So GPI for the planet type theme was also a big one that came across on a number of engagements. We're still waiting to see how the negotiation agenda shapes up, and I guess this will be very much on the news cycle. But one common theme that is been in all the discussions, and also how the Brazilian presidency was positioning, is very much implementation COP, and there are not so many big issues to negotiate. It's really more on implementation and getting things done. And that plus, of course, always the financing and investment agenda. So those will be the key things. Adding on to yesterday's session, which was what the big themes are, and this is some of the additional sentiment that they're hearing also here with the various engagements. So thanks a lot, and back to you, Arun.
Thank you, Mr. Dave, for the speech on that issue. And so now, finally, it is the end of the session. So thank you. With that, I'd like to conclude today's program. So thank you all for joining us on this third day of the Malaysian Support for the COP30 event. We hope you enjoyed the sessions and the discussions. Before you leave, we would be grateful if you can complete a short post-session survey. A Zoom poll will pop up on the screen like it did right now. And if it doesn't appear, simply click on the poll icon at the top left of your screen. Do stay tuned for our upcoming sessions from November 14th to November 21st, where we will continue exploring a diverse range of climate themes, which are all listed on the CGM website. Don't miss out on Day 4's theme, which is Synergy and Resilience, taking place at the same time tomorrow. The recording of today's session will be available soon, and if you have friends or colleagues who would like to join, registrations are still open. We look forward to seeing you again tomorrow. Bye-bye.